My grandmother sewed for everyone in the family, from wedding dresses to bathrobes. But the best creations were her quilts. From what appeared to be useless scraps of material, she would piece together big, warm, wonderful quilts. She kept a large frame in the living room for her current project, and I remember spending hours of summer evenings mulling over the patterns with her, searching for the one I could identify. There was a special delight in finding a swatch from one of my sports shirts. There, next to my plaid, was someone else's polka dots, next to remnants from kitchen curtains or some cousin's overalls. She even made an entire quilt from Grandpa's old ties. There was real pride in being part of one of her creations. To this day, I find it enormously sad that more of her quilts were not saved. I am sure that I could still identify the different pieces and savor the memories. Grandparents and grandchildren are not only crucial for one another's emotional development and happiness, they need one another. I'm Arthur Kornhaber, a child and family psychiatrist who has been studying the nature of the grandparent-grandchild relationship since 1975. We found that the relationship was special, unique, and not at all like a parent-child relationship once removed. We found that the grandparent-grandchild bond is second only in emotional power to the parent-child bond. That grandparents and grandchildren affect one another just because they exist. Unconditional love is a feeling. It's an emotion that is expressed through an attachment where two individuals celebrate and feel good about each other because they exist. In history, it's the story of all lovers in the period of infatuation. Young lovers can do no wrong. They see themselves reflected in each other's eyes, and they see romance and beauty and good feelings. Grandparents and grandchildren, because they live apart from the middle dimension, because they don't have to socialize each other, are infatuated with one another. They make each other happy.
I always envied people that did have grandchildren. I waited a long time for her. And good Lord, when she was born, it was a whole new thing. I didn't think there could be anything like it. Hard to explain. But such a feeling of fulfillment, and it's something I don't know, it's something brand new. And yet it's all mine, and it's all for love.
I think my grandfather's very special. If I didn't have my grandfather, I don't know what to do.
My grandmother, she treats me like somebody by myself, not any other person.
Well, see, my grandmother used to give me advice about things, and like if I was sick, then she'd give me like medicine or some special soup because she's a really good cook.
She's just there whenever I need her, and I just love her for what she is and not for what she gives me.
She's really great. She bakes all these cakes and cookies and stuff, and she spoils you rotten.
I think they're wonderful.
They're so nice to me.
He loves me.
I love my grandpa. I love my grandpa and grandma because
my grandmother never spanks me.
My grandfather, he's very special to both of us and all the other grandchildren he has. And we play a lot there, and sometimes we go swimming. And without him, I think he need us, and we need him. We didn't have him, I guess we'd be lonely.
Grandparents and grandchildren have a special, direct, unique emotional bond. And this all starts at birth. Every time a child is born, a grandparent is born. A new grandchild is born. A new three-generational family is also born. Grandparents and grandchildren, like parents and children, are part of one another. Grandparents have come before. They know what life is like. They know what life is about. And when they see young children coming who are like them and resemble them and are part of them, spiritually they're part of their immortality. They're part of their own genes that will live forever. They have special feelings toward them, feelings of protection, feelings of nurture, because they're part of themselves, just as parents are part of that three-generational system. And nature has provided for this, because grandparents and grandchildren share the time, their place in society, which is out of the mainstream, the patience and the love and attachment to spend time together in an unconditional love system. They are crazy about one another and attracted to one another just because they exist. There is no other bond like this. Brothers and sisters fight. They're fighting for the parents' attention. Parents have to socialize children, so they boss them around, and children try to get away with it. Well, nature has put grandparents in the background. In fact, one of the myths that grandparents spoil children is arisen from the fact that parents are jealous that their own parents, the child's grandparents, never treated them like that.
Most parents think that grandparents spoil their kids. And in my case, I think there's some justification for that because...
Well, we love our children just as much as ever. There's no change there. Our children are our children, always will be. But this is something, this is a brand new love. This is something in a class all by itself. It's not paternal, it's not maternal. Grandparental, what can I tell you? I wouldn't take half the nonsense or spend half the time with my own, really. And I spent a lot of, whatever free time I had, I spent with my children. It wasn't a hell of a lot, but I make more time now.
Children who have had a close relationship with grandparents and who have lost them carry the grandparents eternally in their minds and their hearts. Because when a child is age 5 or 6 or 7, they think in very magical terms, in Santa Claus terms. They think they can fly. They think Santa Claus can fit down a chimney even there is no chimney. So a beloved grandparent assumes very large and magical proportions because the child is always looking up to the person. When that grandparent dies, the child never sees the grandparent grow old, and the grandparent never changes at a time when a child is fixing his or her ideas for the rest of their life.
My grandfather, who died of cancer, he was very special. He treated me specially in every way. We would go alone out to the ice cream shop and places like that, just him and I. And we would talk together. And then one day he was in the hospital and we found out that he was very sick. And everybody was really sad, and my dad was sort of crying because it was his father. And then he died, and it was on, the funeral was at on Thanksgiving. So we weren't allowed to go because we were really little. And we stayed home with some of the cousins that were older. But it was pretty short, so they came back. But ever since then, we've remembered him.
She was really quite wonderful, and long after she died, I fantasized about her being alive. And she lived with us, and my father, she was my mother's mother, and my father was nuts about her. We all were. And after her husband died, after my grandfather died, she came to live with us, and it was shortly after that that she got cancer, and she had a radical mastectomy, and it was very sweet in a way because we all knew about it, and I remember what she looked like. I remember her incredible gash, you know, across this lovely white skin. I remember taking my friends into the bedroom and showing them her, what do you call it, prosthesis or whatever, you know, her fake breast. And at the time, you know, it looked nothing like her other one did, and we had wonderful laughs about it. She had laughs about it. And we even knew as children that she had 5 years, and if she could make it through 5 years, she was going to make it. Yeah. And actually she didn't. She made it to almost 5 years when it came back. And we were at that time we had moved and back to the Detroit area where she was from, and she lived with us. And we all lived through this death, which took about a year. And she was in and out of the hospital, and whenever she wasn't being treated with chemotherapy or whatever, she wanted to be home, and we wanted her home. And she came home, and her weight kept decreasing, and I guess her looks changed radically, but we didn't notice it because we saw her every day.
This is so
And,
wonderful. Wonderful story.
And anyway, when she died in August, and early in July, friends of my parents were going off to New York to Lake Champlain, and they invited me to go with them. And my mother said, fine. She had 4 kids and a sick mother, and she was exhausted, and she was skin and bones herself. So off I went, and when I came home, the first thing I did was run into the house and run upstairs calling, Nana, Nana, Nana. By this time, she was in a hospital bed, and she was totally emaciated. And it's very interesting. I ran in, and I went to her bed, and I railed, and I said, "You're not my Nana." And she said, "Oh, Dorothy," to my mother, she said, "Tina's just excited." She said, she just doesn't know me because she's been away for a while. And I spent the next several days until she died crawling past her door because I was so frightened by this vision that wasn't this wonderful, warm, touching Nana that I had remembered. And she died. We were out playing, and my other grandmother came and called us in and said that she had died. And we mourned. I think the adults mourned more than the children did. They mourned very formally. The priest came, and they said rosaries, and they closed the blinds, and the children were brought into the bedroom, and we sat along the periphery. But I remember that the sorrow, the public sorrow, was theirs. And anyway, we all waited while the undertaker came, and I remember he came in with a stretcher. He came out holding this poor little bag of bones. Didn't even use it, you know, and he put her body in the car. And, you know, we had a funeral and a huge Irish family and lots of mourning. But I don't remember that my parents or that the adults around considered how much we were mourning, the children, especially me. And so I think, consequently, I mourned very privately and very intensely, and almost in a in kind of a fantasy way for years and years.
Yeah.
Fell asleep in that same bedroom where she died, you know, wondering what would she be like if she hadn't had the cancer. Would she still be with us? Would she still be spunky? You know, would I still care for her as much? Would I, say, as a teenager, relate to her as much as I had as a child? And it was really quite a living part of my life, and nothing that I ever shared with my mother. I don't think she ever knew. And recently I told her, you know, and she laughed. And I think she was very, very touched. But I don't think she really felt the depth of emotion, you know, that a child had at that time.
In human history, for 40,000 years, since we have roamed the earth in tribes, the parent generation has always been the hunters and the gatherers. Grandparents have held down the fort, have transmitted values. Grandparents were the repository of information before the printed word. Grandparents' stories transmitted cultural heritages and ways.
Like they show you your history, like your family, like family tree and stuff. Yeah, you know, so like they tell you about your cousins and their grandparents, you know, because you probably never see your grandparents' because they probably kicked off a few centuries ago. But you know, so they're like a key to the past. Like you're never gonna find like the stuff that they tell you in the encyclopedia. They have it all stored up. Yeah, you know.
Lil's parents and my grandparents came from the old country. All four of my grandparents came from Greece, and Lil's parents came from Poland. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud, and I want to know where they came from. They just tell us story upon story about their villages in the mountains and the way of life there.
I agree. I mean, I think it's really nice to know where you came from, and you should be proud of it. And you know, more importantly, a lot about even from just where we come from, you sort of understand both our parents and their parents. Obviously, were European, and there's a certain way that you're sort of brought up and certain attitudes, and it was sort of important for us to find out their backgrounds and their views, because you sort of better understand why they felt about certain things or how they taught us to view certain things now.
That's a part of it. Learning the language. Now we're going there. We're going to spend a couple of weeks there, and I think it's just something to be very, very proud of.
Has all these different books and everything in her mind of all our ancestors that came in from England and Europe and every place, and she has a lot of stuff about them.
My grandparents live on a farm, and I stayed with them for a couple nights, and I learned how to feed the cows and how to take eggs from a chicken. And it's not easy to take eggs from a chicken.
It's pretty good to know how they lived back then, you know, like 1930s or something like that. And my grandmother talks a lot when my father was little, how he used to play around and stuff in the yard and everything.
One grandparent told us she felt she was put out of business. McDonald's made better cookies than she did, and television told better stories than she did. But she said, still, no one can cuddle the children like I can. No one can care for them or love for them than I can. So this bond has been with us since human beings have roamed the earth. And this bond will always be with us, no matter what the culture does.
And we would sit around in the front room and sing and have a good time with the family. She was the one that actually inspired me in a lot of ways, because she gave us a lot of loving. Unfortunately, when Mother was away, she was the only one that would look after us, my brother and I. There's only two of us. And she's a typical grandmother, always spoiling the grandchildren. It wasn't much that I wanted, as if she could give it to me, that I didn't get.
In fact, she had lived all my youth with my parents, and she had a great hand in raising me. My mother never went to work, but my grandmother was old-line German, and when they were there, they were in charge. And it certainly didn't hurt.
I was with my grandmother since I was 17, and she meant a lot to me, because She guided me and made a lady out of me. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. And
grandmother and grandfather lived about 5 blocks away. And I stopped in there on the way to school many times, especially on the way back from school, because by this time my grandmother would have a lot of home-baked things.
He was like more of a father to me than my own father. Very fond memories I have of him. I was very close with the guy. He had a lot of old stories. He was in World War I, things like that. He'd tell us about France, Flanders, the fields of Flanders, things like that. Things that are just history to me. He gave me first-hand stories. Saw Babe Ruth play.
Marriages flourish when there are deeply involved grandparents around. Deeply involved means on a level of caring, of nurturing, of being there when adversity strikes. Parents should take advantage of the grandparents being there. They have built-in babysitters. They have someone to have holidays with. They have someone who will care for them in case of adversity. If something happens to the parents, the grandparents are the next natural safety net, the next emotional natural safety net to catch the children if the parents falter. Wise parents understand that.
I've told my mother that I thank her for, and my father also, for all the love and feeling that they have for my children, because it teaches you how to pass that feeling on.
I think they're very important. I think their grandparents see them pretty often, and they have a lot of input. And I think just the extra love is very important.
I think they're extremely important. A grandparent is a role, a model role for the young people growing up. They are people who have had years of experience in love and compassion, which they share with the children, the grandchildren.
She's there when I need her. She babysits him for me, and she teaches him right from wrong, same way I was brought up.
I don't think that anybody should have to live without them. I think they're wonderful, and I think that you can learn a lot from them.
Definitely, we make their life much richer because they can then share something that we have had, and they can also go ahead and plan for their future.
I really have learned from my own experience how important grandparents are to children, and that they make your family a little bit stronger if you have the chance to enjoy them.
Well, it's a simple fact of life that nature made every child to be raised by 6 people, because there are 4 grandparents and 2 parents. And this is a very natural support system. When anybody falters, there's always many adults to take care of the child. And this is what's missing from our society today, is that one-to-one attention, that ratio of 6 people to 1 child, in which the child is celebrated and nourished and flourishes, as opposed to a society now where there are 25 or 30 children to 1 adult. There is no reason that we have to live like this. Our society no longer fits the way that we are. A child emerges from parents who emerge from grandparents, a natural telescopic 3-generational family. In a healthy world, the society should be shaped to fit the family. And what's happening now is we are shaping people and human beings to fit our society, and we have to change this. Grandparents are too passive. Parents have their head in the sand. They're not looking at what's going on, and the children are helpless victims to this. We can change this in 20 years, because every time a new generation comes along, we can change this. What do we need, and how can we change it? Believe it or not, it's very simple. For grandparents, stop being passive. Support the parents financially, socially, intellectually. Don't move from your families. Get back there. Help the grandchildren. Spend time with them. Stay with them. If you can't, they can't come to you, you go to them. Be there when those grandchildren are born. Be a part of the family and establish a family continuity. Don't go off somewhere to retire. It's a myth. It's an early death. there's no meaning to life there. For parents, start thinking about putting an emotional priority on your life. Don't move away from the family for money. Stay there. Weave those two generations together, and then get off with your husband or wife, and it's good for your marriage. Keep that connection going. And for children, especially adolescents, if you have grandparents out there, you go out and you get them. And don't let them get away. And don't let them go away to retire. And don't let them disappear from your lives. Howl, open your mouth, and protest. You can make an emotional revolution come true in your own lifetime. For parents especially, you are the future grandparents in America. You have got to take over now and start thinking about that.
Yeah, well, almost 4 years ago, my daughter was expecting her first child, and I came back the day before the child was born, and spent so much time in this area that I finally moved back so I could spend more time with all of them. I just enjoyed the interaction with the family.
Yeah, my grandmother, as I say, she was an always there person. No matter what I did, she showed up. And by the time I was in high school, in the summer, I started to work with a carnival that toured, lived in Pennsylvania, that toured all through eastern Pennsylvania. And when I wouldn't write her, I wouldn't call. I remember the first time I'd been gone, about a month. And one night I was out calling bingo. I look up in the middle of the carnival lot, and there's grandmother standing there. She'd taken a streetcar, 2 buses, and I don't know what else to get there, but there she stood.
My grandparents always come with us. And they live only 3 streets away from us. Because whenever we move somewhere, they always move to the same town.
I haven't trained for it. I didn't practice. I didn't make up my mind that I would be a good grandmother. It all happened very naturally. I am not working at it. It's just something that's easy for me to do, and if I'm a good grandmother, there's no one thing I've done except love them, and they're very important to me.
And I had sort of a rebellious youth, and I remember going to visit my grandmother who lived close to where I was going to college. And it was so important for me to go because she knew it would work out. You know, she knew I was going to turn out okay. And I would like my children to have that. I'd like them to be able to go back to their parents when, you know, they're not liking me for a particular reason or we're going through rough times. And knowing that someone is always there to care.
This, as far as the Irving gross, it's the end of the line. Everything I have, my whole future is right there. Whatever she brings forth, of course, is, I'll never know, but I hope we're doing right, so it'll come out right.
I met a bunch of children that are beautiful, the most adorable little things I have ever met in my life. And they have such great futures. And I can't understand why this should have to happen to little kids who are adorable. And they broke my heart to see that they are suffering what I'm suffering, because talking with them, they are suffering as much as I have suffered for 13 years. And it may be a shorter time in their life, but they're so much younger than I am. And they've had no real life to live yet. They never gave themselves a chance. And the worst of it all is, you know who makes people like this? Society. The same magazines that saved me, in one sense, are ruining this entire world, because every book you pick up has a new diet. Every television show you see, they're stressing. Everybody's fat. Go on a diet. You've got to lose weight. It's the most important thing in the world. Why?
Anorexia nervosa and bulimia have come into prominent focus in the last few years. Books, TV shows, and magazine articles all feature these eating disorders. Through its Focus on Health series, the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey is engaged in an ongoing effort to inform you about timely health problems. In this second part of our series on eating disorders, we will go behind the thin line and share with you the many different theories on the causes of anorexia and bulimia. We will speak with health experts, victims, and a representative of the advertising industry. While they all agree that this is a serious health problem, they don't agree on the causes.
I think there's a stress factor of dieting that has to be present in all patients. And the stress factor of dieting can be from different reasons. For example, ballet dancers will diet to increase their professional performance ability. Wrestlers will diet for control of their weight. Jockeys will diet. And in the professions where dieting is necessary for weight control, these professions have a higher rate of eating disorder problems.
I see anorexia as part of a continuum of women's major psychological symptom, which I consider to be expressed through eating problems. In other words, I see a range of eating problems representing psychological difficulties that women, and emotional difficulties that women are having, that range from serious compulsive eating and constant binging and dieting and binging and dieting and binging and dieting and a real obsession with that, all the way down to bulimics, where the binges are very, very large and the purges are very, very large, to anorexics. And I really like to look at it as a continuum and to understand the social forces that are building that up.
I think it's pretty well documented that most young anorexics at one time probably were overweight and began dieting, and that anorexia eventually developed somewhere during that diet phase, where they just didn't stop.
One of the factors is definitely physiological. There is a malfunction in a part of the brain that we call the limbic system, or the hypothalamus. And this is what leads to hormonal abnormalities, and many of the physical changes that we see with anorexia nervosa are secondary to changes in this area of the brain.
Thin is beautiful. You can never be too thin or too rich. It just, if you go into a store, the mannequins are thin. If you open your copy of Vogue, the models are thin. If you open a catalog to buy something, the models are thin.
Society just won't accept you if you're heavy. If you're a heavy weight, they want light. They want light people.
I don't know. Everywhere you go, there's an emphasis on all these diet plans, all these diet centers. You know, if you're thin, you're happy, that type of thing. So I thought I would get thin and be happy.
Well, I think there's
I guess I have two reactions to that. One is that I think there's no question that all of us, and I would guess especially people with an emotional disorder of some kind, like to think that things we don't like about ourselves are caused by some outside agent, and are not, that we're not totally responsible for that. And so I guess advertising is an easy outside agent to name, because we're so visible. Advertising is so visible.
These are just some of the explanations mentioned whenever the causes of eating disorders are probed. Next, we'll take a closer look at these theories in pursuit of an answer.
Well, we don't know what actually causes anorexia, but I think there are probably multiple factors that go into the development of the disorder. I think there's a stress factor of dieting that has to be present in all patients. And the stress factor of dieting can be from different reasons.
But I know I myself and some other males who had the illness feel that for their hobby or their job, they had to be slim. To be the best runner you could be, you had to be slim. To be the best wrestler you can be, you have to meet your weight. Or if you're a jockey, you have to be light. You think society just won't accept you if you're heavy. If you're a heavy weight, they want light people. Ballet dancers, the same thing. They have to be light.
Now that's only one component of the onset of the illness, the stress of dieting. I believe that the people who eventually go on to develop anorexia probably have a biological predisposition, because surveys done in high schools in the Scandinavian countries have shown that almost all young women diet at some point in time during their high school education years. And yet of all the women dieting, only a few go on to develop anorexia. So there has to be something unique about the patients who develop this disorder.
The issue is that women should be valued on the basis of their body, number one, that's the diet page, and on the basis of their ability to give to other people but not themselves, number two, that's the recipe page. And if we look at it symbolically, what you have is social kind of forces which are saying, take care of other people and deprive yourself. And do it in such a way, and you're valued on the basis of your body. So one of the expressions of the success that you have about being the right kind of person, looking right, and so on, is having your body just absolutely perfect for whatever that year's perfection model is going to be.
My husband was working in New York and I was working in Hartford, and we lived in both cities and ran back and forth between both cities, and we have 2 teenage children. And so it was very difficult to manage being mother, being mistress of 2 households, being working woman, being commuter, and it took an awful lot of energy. And I think that was the point at which things started to crack. And the eating behavior, which I sort of had in balance so I could run my life and I could function, started to take over more and more. I think it was partially because I was lonely without Frank, and partially just because of the tremendous amount of stress that I was under, and I was eating even more erratically than I ever ate before, if at all.
The whole thing began with just middle-aged boredom. Children don't need you anymore, and the volunteer work. I needed something, but I didn't know what it was.
Commonly, young women with anorexia at one time had what would be considered a mild weight problem.
Now, how does this happen?
Well, I think there are a lot of speculations about this. The fact that they had a weight problem to begin with probably meant that they're rather food-focused. And certainly the victim of anorexia is very food-focused.
I love to cook. I was making everybody around me fat, except myself. Always into food. All I could think of, all I could breathe, all I could live was food. Shopping for food. I had more food in my house than anybody could eat.
It's not that they're not eating because they don't like it. They like it a whole lot. They're denying themselves, and the issue of power becomes more important than the food itself.
The anorexic, I have my ability. The good things I got out of it were to bring my family much closer together. I got much more attention than I ever got at home when I was normal. My mother and father pay much more attention to each other since I've been sick. I'm getting a lot of cards in the mail. I'm getting phone calls, which I never got before, that people want to know how I'm doing. And this would have never happened if I wasn't anorexic. I couldn't find no other way to get their love. I mean, I tried to be perfect, but that didn't work. So then I got sick. And that seemed to work for me. And I will stay sick until I know that they won't go back to their old ways.
Control is a big issue in people who have this illness. And they need to feel as much as possible that they are in control.
If I get mad or angry, the first thing, well, I'm not eating. Like Mike and I had a fight last night, I'm not eating then.
I may not be able to control anything else in my environment. My parents may be splitting up. My boyfriend may be pressuring me to do things sexually that I don't want to do. But I'm going to have control in one area of my life, and that is what my weight does.
The most common victim of anorexia is the young woman. And I think the messages young women receive from the media, from the advertisers, is very clearly that young and thin is beautiful. And the songs that are on the radio, we get very distorted images of what a healthy female body looks like if you look at the advertisements. So I think it's easy to lose sight of what is young and beautiful. Who is young and beautiful? And is beauty only a designer jeans?
going down the highway stuff, we always see stuff like stay thin, thin is cool, and stuff like that. This is in Florida when we went on vacation. We were on a highway for an hour, and all these, for the suntan lotions, everybody's really thin and everything, and like Pepsi Light and all these commercials, everybody's so thin. So people want to get thinner to look better.
Well, I think that ads and diet books and being bombarded with TV of slinky ladies and thin guys doesn't help the situation any.
Television commercials, like the Tab commercials, you see the one gorgeous lady walking in the bikini, and then the other lady who, she's skinny too, and it acts as if, you know, she's not skinny because the other lady is so perfect. But all the commercials are, everybody's just thin, they're perfect, they're gorgeous, and that's not true because everybody's not like that.
Well, advertising has been has blamed, if you will, for a lot of things before, and so it's not unusual for me to hear that people might think that. It really comes down to your view of what advertising is and how it relates to social trends. I know that it's common for people outside the business to think that advertising does create these trends and create these things. From my experience in the business, and most of the people in the business, what advertising tries to do, what the people trying to market products try to do, is not to create these things, but to identify them and find them and see what's happening and then jump on that bandwagon. There's no question that advertising can exploit a trend, might even be able to emphasize it and make it happen quicker. But there's really not a whole lot of evidence that advertising creates those kind of social trends, that they would happen anyway.
I really feel these commercials on Diet Pepsi and Take Equal, and they're teaching people how to sneakily avoid calories. They don't realize how some people's mind is just ready to absorb anything to do with diet because everybody wants to look like a movie star.
I'm sure they are influenced by that, and I think that it's probably very common for most people, and especially so for people with that kind of emotional disorder, I think, to look for outside agents that are the cause of the problems that they're having, and advertising is one of the most visible of those outside agents. And advertising will promote products. It promotes a broad range of products, but advertising will promote products, and so they see it and rationalize that as one of the causes of their disorder.
Why is this society forcing us to be something that we're not? And kids, like the kids at Carrier, are young. Their minds are open. They'll absorb anything.
This is a complicated problem, and I don't mean to make light of it, but advertising has been named in a lot of cases, and I think it comes down to the fact that advertising really does not create most of these things, but it's a very visible part of it, and it does have a tendency to exploit some of the societal trends. The one thing I'd like to say, though, is that there are, I would think that you would find most medical people who would say that the good that's been done for society by the emphasis on slimness and health for society at large over the last whatever period of time you want to talk about has to be weighed against whatever the problem we might be talking about with this very small population that would be an aberration in this case, but that certainly the emphasis on slimness and health has been a good thing for the population at large in everything I've ever seen written by doctors or medical people.
Every commercial is a diet commercial. Well, every doctor on Merv Griffin is a new diet doctor. There's the scars. You can name thousands of them. These little kids don't stand a chance. And how many people are they going to see like me?
Well, I have to say there's nobody more in the business of promoting diet and exercise than the medical community. If the rap is being placed on the advertising community, it's in the wrong place there, because I have to tell you that everybody in the medical community talks about diet and exercise.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the whole society's caught up in it. And don't forget, a lot of people are making a whole lot of money on fad diets. And that's a pretty strong motivator. Fad diets are constantly on the bestseller list, and there's a lot of money to be made.
was affection and letting somebody make me feel like I was somebody. And I worked awful hard to get it. Otherwise, I felt nobody would like me.
I don't think my father ever hugged and kissed me. The first time he ever kissed me was on my wedding day. And that was when I was 23 years old. And he never showed emotions. So I guess I became like that too. I put up a wall.
My parents were middle-aged when I was born, and they were sort of preoccupied with their own problems. And I would beg my mother to say she loved me, and she would say, "Oh, well, you know I do," but she would never say that she did. And early on, I learned to just sort of escape into food for nurturing, I guess. And that just continued throughout my whole life, escaping into food, and later booze, drugs, anything that I could escape into to hide the feelings, to try to fill the voids within me.
Parents decided that a long time ago that they weren't going to show emotions when the first, my oldest brother was born. They said that they're not going to show emotions to each other. And now there's no communication.
I know with my family, there was always a lot of affection shown, but sometimes I just didn't want it. I didn't want the hug, and it began to annoy me, really annoy me, and it was every day, like 10 times a day. But I just accepted it because I didn't know. I thought it wasn't right to say, I don't want that now. So I just kind of adopted that. But it was hard for me to get used to because I didn't see other people's parents doing that. It seemed strange to me, so it's kind of the opposite. There's the only picture we have of them holding hands is like back in 1950 something, before they were married. And it's the only time I've ever seen them holding hands, much less living together and being married and everything. They say that they love each other when I started doing this, but I don't see it. I've never ever seen it.
There is no specific single cause of eating disorders. It is a subtle interaction of multiple factors. It seems that when a susceptible personality is paired with a specific set of circumstances, an eating disorder can result. But what we do know is that eating disorders seem to afflict young people who have trouble coping with family stresses, peer pressures, or other societal pressures. They experience a compulsion for perfection. They obsessively diet or exercise until it gets out of hand. Finally, they need to experience a great deal of control over their own lives or over the behaviors of others. We hope that this program will serve to clarify some of the causes and to help you to identify these eating disorders before it's too late, so that it may prevent you or your loved ones from becoming a victim.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. 'Twas blind.
I had a dream, and I dreamt
that this was a void. There was no sky, there was no trees, there was no grass, there was no ground. It was just a void. And people were standing, old neighbors, old friends, old acquaintances, old relatives that had passed on. And they were all standing in a line, and they all smiled and shook hands and said to me, they're very, very glad to see me. And I went down this long, long, long line, and then when I got to the end of it, I stood in line, and I was waiting to shake hands with the next person that came along this line of death.
And grace will lead me home. Now everyone. Amazing.
Seeing my father, mother, and come back to me, but they didn't tell me just how I'm going. They didn't tell me how they went, but I know how they went. But they don't tell you when you're going or how you're going. They just come back in a dream. You can see them. Imagine you saw them.
I was lost.
I am 82 years old. I just had a brush with death, very, very closely. I just had a very serious operation, and I thank the Lord, and from Him, I was in the twilight zone. As I was talking to my wife, who was dead 21 years, and she said, I don't need you up here yet.
We'll be focusing on a topic which has mystified, fascinated, and long been a cause of debate among scientists, philosophers, religious zealots, and poets alike: death. Whether we're aware of it or not, we're all involved in a struggle to come to terms with and accept our own mortality, to realize that each moment that we live, we come one moment closer to death. We're all in the process of dying, yet each one of us feels immortal. We want to think that only the seriously ill patient can sense his approaching demise, yet each one of us, no matter how healthy we are, no matter what our age, must at some point come to terms with the only certain fact of our existence on this earth: we will one day die. We think little about it until we become old or ill, or until someone close to us passes away and forces us into a confrontation with our own mortality. The people we are about to see attend an interfaith daycare program at the Daughters of Israel Geriatric Center, located in West Orange, New Jersey. They live at home, but travel to the center each day to avail themselves of its services, to participate in its activities, to socialize. We spoke with May Sherko, Director of Daycare Services for the center, to find out more.
We initially started with a very small group of very depressed people who were part of the day center but not really interacting well with the rest of the group, and we thought there's another nurse that assists me also with these groups.
Did you find that this helped tremendously in allowing them to express their feelings?
Yes. Some people who were very reticent would really open up, and we found that there are a lot of hidden anxieties.
For instance?
Some of them have family problems and did not want to share with anyone, but upon discovering that other people had family discord or problems to solve, they were freer to verbalize. Some don't have family and did not know what they would do without a support system. Who would they go to if problems arose? So, by dealing with these problems and trying to find solutions, our anxiety level decreased with these particular people. So others would say, can we join your group?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find just in the discussion itself that the anxiety is alleviated, maybe not even quite so much as solving the problem itself? Or do you find that providing support services for them in addition to allowing them to express their feelings is just as important?
I think it's just as important, but it's a temporary relief, just to discuss and verbalize and find how other people cope with the similar type problems. But generally, people have deep-rooted problems that need a support system. They need outside intervention. Those who are severely depressed may just be depressed because of loneliness. Others have problems they have no solution for.
Well, are most of these people comfortable with the fact that they're aging, getting older, or are they happy, are they depressed, are they lonely?
It's really individual. Some people are very upset about the thought of aging and try to look younger, become more active in some of the physical activity that I can do it. Some of them are very intolerant of people who have problems with confusion or with difficulty in walking or with their appearance. I believe it stems from the way you have viewed people all your life, really, but aging does have its problems. You don't look the same anymore. You don't sound the same. You have problems with your eyesight, problems with your hearing, and not everyone can accept this.
I think we're just about ready to start the session. Is there anything in particular that I should look for? What can I expect to see?
Well, I think that you will find in our discussion groups there's a lot of freedom to express, but some people get rather carried away with their own philosophy and they rather enjoy the limelight. There are times I must put limitations on how much a person will be allowed to say, because we will go back into life histories and life patterns, and you will find that others become restless. They no longer are interested in what the person has to say. It seems to be human nature that whatever you have to say is important, but maybe not what someone else has to say, unless that is a problem that you are trying to deal with. And if you are interested in what that person has to say, then you will have undivided attention, because they are trying to find solutions to their own problems.
Well, that's interesting. So you're saying that the sharing process isn't not really as important to anybody as just understanding their own problems.
Understanding their own and trying to find solutions. However, I was say, however, sharing is important, because you know, you have a lot of things brought to the surface that might be kept hidden, and by having enough courage, let's say, to verbalize a particular situation, it encourages others.
I mean, this week one day, I don't know, I couldn't get up from my sleep. I couldn't get up. I know I was in a sleep, in a very weak sleep. You know what I mean? Like you want to get up and you can't. So I said, maybe I'm dying.
So how did that feel, Helen?
It feels that you're afraid, you're alone, you're all alone in the house, and you get frightened.
Now, the thing that was scaring me the most was not the dying, but being buried. I can't be with the thought of being buried, of being eaten by worms. That is a thing that really, really sends me. I know I have to die, and I wish I would die in my sleep.
Fear, forget about fear. I do not fear anything anymore. Life to me is one day at a time. And about being buried, don't worry about being buried. There's nothing. Your soul is going up, not down. The body goes down, that's all.
The body goes down, but the thought is still there. I'm still alive and still can think. And when I sit and think, I went to a guru, and I didn't agree with everything, but he did say that it was very good for people to meditate for at least a half hour a day and to give different thoughts priorities, things that disturb you the most. You think about the first, and then you go down the line, and for a whole half hour think of things and try to extinguish the bad things from your mind. And always, no matter when I start in with my meditation, I always start in with the fact that I'm going to be buried. And I can't. I went to a priest, talked about it. I went to a minister, talked about it. I wrote to different places and talked about it. and I still am not satisfied with their answers. And if I could be buried in a glass cage or something like that, but that's what disturbs me, not death, not
That's
death.
a real fear of Helen's, and I think that, you know, the purpose of our discussion groups is to share with others, and perhaps by talking about it, relieve ourselves of some of these burdens. We do see that people are living longer, that are surviving serious surgery that perhaps 20 years ago wouldn't have been thought of. Do you personally feel that this is a good thing for you as an older person? Do you want to have your life extended another 10, 15, 20 years? Is that quality there? Is the purpose of life there? How do you feel about this? Molly?
Well, I have strong feelings of being able to carry on. That's my one wish. I always felt that as long as I'm able to think clearly and do some things for myself, I will fight to the end to do whatever I can. My one fear is that something will happen and I won't be able to think clearly. That has been my ambition all my life.
Many of us have fears. Some of them seem irrational to others. It doesn't matter whether they're irrational. When they're happening to you, they're real. But I'm wondering if it's necessary to find solutions. Can we live with fear? Can we live with the anxiety? What is the fear really about? Is the fear the being buried? Is the fear the not seeing another sunrise, of not seeing your grandchildren grow up? I think we should get to what the fear represents.
I think the unknown. They absolutely have no knowledge of anything. And that's the only thing that frightens everyone, whether they admit it or not. But it doesn't help. So you know this is the result and it will be. So the only way to help yourself, I don't know how everyone else does it, is to get adjusted to it, that it'll come when the time comes.
How do you adjust to that?
Well, I adjust to the way things are personally go with me. You know, in each and every one is living their own life. You know, what is good for me probably is not good for everyone. I must have freedom in everything I do. And I don't like to be, for instance, you can't do that, you can't go here, you can't go there. I like to be free in my thoughts, I like to be free in my movements, and I try and find everything that is new and take a certain part in it, because I am so interested in everything.
How many of you have wills? How many of you have prepared wills?
I have one will to live much after death.
Yeah, you don't want to get the
And
lawyer
I'm
the
the
money.
only one what I don't believe in all the nonsense. If I have to die today, tomorrow, I don't worry. That's my way to enjoy.
But do you have a will, Sam? I don't mean will to live. You know what I'm talking
I have
about.
to live.
Sam,
Yes.
you know what I'm talking, a written document that says I
don't
leave
need
Bessie
it.
everything.
I have nothing, I got nothing, and I don't feel for anything, and that's all.
You have often told me that you want to live for at least 150 years because you have a new purpose
I
in
don't
life.
care even till 200. I got time. I can hear better. And I'm not afraid to die. If I will die, I don't worry what will be tomorrow. I just enjoy every day, and I like to enjoy more and more.
Sam, maybe you could share with us your new purpose in wanting to live at least...
I got a nice sweet girl. I love her, and I like to stay with her at least 60, 80. I don't care. I love her. That's all.
How does Bessie feel about that? You think you can go 50,
She has
60
nothing
more
against
years,
this.
Bessie, can you put up with Sam for another 60 years?
I think so.
You think so?
To get a different perspective on the elderly, we visited Dr. Frank C. Snope, a professor of family medicine at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, Rutgers Medical School.
Dr. Snope, we've just heard the elderly discussing their feelings about aging and about dying. And do you think it's a good idea to have these sessions?
Yeah, I think the elderly, like certain people with chronic illness or people with other problems, benefit from getting together and sharing their experiences. So I think one of the issues about getting older is the fact that you think, all of the things that are happening to you are unique to you, when in fact they're probably shared by many people. So it's a comfort just to be with other people who have the same problems and know that you're not unique and
alone in it.
And alone.
Well, this feeling of alienation, of loneliness, this was just a little bit of some of the feelings that were expressed there. Do you run into this a lot in your practice?
Well, it depends, I think, on the kind of practice that you have. I think, you have to realize, as we were saying before, that most of the elderly people in this country are not institutionalized. Probably the number in institutions is somewhere around 5%. Many of them are living with families, with spouses, with friends, with other relatives, and are probably reasonably well adjusted.
When you say elderly, you're talking about what
Over
age?
65.
I see.
Right.
That's a very small percentage. But yet, even though they may be living so-called within society, they may still have these feelings, I think, of maybe being alienated, not feeling as though they're in the mainstream of society. Do you think, am I right about that?
Yes, I think, I think that's probably true for many older people, particularly as they age and become more frail, as their hearing fails, as their vision fails, as they get arthritis and aren't able to move around, as they get feeling weakness and dizziness, as many of the aging processes occur, they feel helpless, alone, as though they're losing control.
What do you think are? Do you think that we, as a society, could allow the elderly to come into society more, to make more of a contribution? Do you see any possibilities for that?
Well, I think certainly a retirement age of 65 probably doesn't make much sense as a rule, because there are many people over the age of 65 who, in many ways have just peaked in terms of their ability to contribute to society. And that's just been proven over and over.
But within your own practice, I know you have a family practice, but you have a special interest in the elderly. Do you see the elderly people who are coming to you, do they seem to want to really work? And
the majority of them are vigorous, their minds are intact, they're certainly capable of doing much more than sitting at home and watching television. And I think that one of the problems that they feel is that they are not making the contribution that they could in terms of their intellect, in terms of their skills, in terms of what they have to contribute to society. I don't think that's as much so in other societies. I think other societies put a premium on age. We kind of have the feeling that when you get to be 65, in the scrap heap,
I think that's true.
Yeah, I think that's changing. I think there's much more increased consciousness about people over the age of 65 and their value to society. But it's coming slowly.
Can I ask you, how old are you, Doctor?
I'm 50.
Do you think that your attitudes towards aging, towards death, have they changed from, say, when you were a young man of 20?
Yeah, there's no question about that. As I become more, as my eyesight fails and I need my little cheaters and vision or hearing goes a little bit, you begin to appreciate what many of the older people have been saying for all these years.
Which is, what sort of things do you appreciate more?
Well, you appreciate the fact that they say, I just can't do things like I used to, and, it's difficult. I can't even walk the way I used to. I get very frustrated by that. I have a father who's 78, and I hear a lot of that from him, too.
You were mentioning before that you've also found some of the elderly in your practice have an acceptance of death to the extent that they almost look forward to it. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think that what I've noticed, and I noticed it early on and didn't understand it as well as I think I do now, and that is that I would take care of older people who were reaching the ends of their lives, and they would say, I'm ready to die, or I'm prepared to die, or it doesn't frighten me that I'm going to die. And that was hard for me to understand when I was younger, and death was just not an alternative. It was a scary alternative. I think as I've grown a little bit older, I've begun to appreciate what they're saying, and I think what they're really saying is that I've come to that point in my life where death now is not the bad alternative that it was before, and in fact may be a welcome alternative, particularly for people who have suffered a great deal, have had a lot of pain, or people who have lost many of their faculties, who are blind, or who can't hear well, or who may have other problems. I think they begin to see death then as a natural extension of their lives, as almost a time I can rest now.
So do you think that really it's the suffering in life, it's the failing of all the sensory faculties that allows someone to finally accept their own mortality?
I think that's part of it. I think it's also people see their friends disappear. There's no one that they have grown up with or can relate to, and they just begin to see that life then loses the vigorous meaning that it had for them when they were younger, and death then becomes all right. It's okay. Now I can die, and I realize that that's all right.
But I live now, I'm much richer what I was in my young days. I have nothing to fear and nothing to worry. In the young days, I had a family and had to work and make a living. Now Uncle Sam sends in a check when I spend them. What else I have to worry? What? Nothing to fear, nothing to worry. Maybe I'm dead, I don't know. I don't know.
You're too lazy to lay down.
I'm lazy to lay down. I enjoy every day. And that's why I say, longer I will be in here, I will enjoy more. Every day is nice.
They call me up, my son calls me up, he's a school teacher, and he calls me up every night before he goes to bed. Mother, how do you feel? What did you do today? Who did you see? And I have very good children, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But I see them mostly weekends. And I'm just happy that I feel good, and I'm not dependent on them to help me, which a lot of children, a lot of mothers, parents have to be dependent, as widows especially. And every day is a big day for me. I'm just contented.
I just make the best of it. I feel when I go to a resting place. We're not going till God get ready for us. And ain't no need of being afraid of dying, because you know you got to die.
Okay, we've just experienced that whole session in which some of the patients were very, very verbal and others didn't talk at all. Do you think that was a fairly typical session?
Yes, I think that we have a few people that have a tendency to dominate the discussion groups, and others are interested and want to know, but are reticent.
Well, do you think that certain people put on a mask, maybe more than usual?
On occasion. It depends on how well you know the person and a little bit about their background. Some of our people are rather self-centered, and they have a tendency to ham it up a little bit, let's say, for the benefit of others.
For instance, in Sam's case.
Yes, Sam has definite ideas and definite opinions, and yet I feel that underneath all this, he is not totally honest, but he does like to be recognized.
That was the interesting thing, was that after the session he pulled me aside, and after just going on and on in the session and being so forceful about how important it was to live and survive and how wonderful life was, he came across extremely angry and started, really voicing his opinions about family and about how nobody talks to each other here, and the direct opposite of what he'd said in this session.
But having a little trouble in here and a little trouble, say, thanks God, I can walk on my left foot because the right one hurts me. I got stomach trouble. That's thanks God. Thanks God. No. To go around with pains and say, thanks God, I say, if He will take away all the pains from the people, I will be very happy. But everyone has pains and goes around, oh, my side, oh, my stomach, thanks God. Why? Why to go around with pains and say, thanks God? If He gives you pain, I will say, thanks God, He shall take them away from them.
I think in Sam's case, Sam is referring mainly to himself because he is so opinionated. He has very often turned others away from him. And because of his special relationship with Bessie, this is not viewed by many of the Day Center members as being an ideal kind of situation. Some of the people really feel maybe that they are old, and because you are old, you don't have these kind of relationships anymore, and they are more or less shunned in a way by other members. And I think that Sam is an angry man at times.
I see. Well, what about this duality of personality that he showed? I mean, do you think that's pretty much universal throughout all the members here? Do they all put on a mask when they want to for company?
No, I don't think the majority do. I think the majority have found enough people to interact with that they don't have that kind of defense. They're more relaxed, and they come here to enjoy, and they participate, and they enjoy the meal particularly. And I think that in the case of Sam, that's more the exception than the rule. If they're not totally honest with themselves, in larger groups, they seek individual or private counsel, and then we have a real feel for what that person is experiencing, and then we're able to help them more so.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We've just seen a myriad of emotions, attitudes, and opinions on aging and on death. If there's something to be learned from all of this, perhaps it's that, although we all go through the aging process, our attitudes about it are as different as we are. And how we face this inevitable process is up to each and every one of us.
Besides the age, I have no eyesight. I can't get around.
You seem to be getting around, though. You seem to be coming to the center very often.
Well, thank God for my friend, that he helps me. Otherwise, I don't know what I would do by now. When I get home, my daughter comes from work. She's busy, she lays down. She has nothing too much to say to me. So I busy myself with the radio, with the TV. I do the best I can, that's all.
Originally, I started to run to lose weight. I weighed about 60 pounds more than I weigh right now, and I lost the weight running.
Aerobic training, the conditioning of the heart is really the first priority of someone who is over 30.
I really want to stress one thing. Playing a sport doesn't get you into necessarily good condition. It's getting conditioned for that sport.
Today we'll be focusing on the expanding field of sports medicine and its importance to the common athlete, like me and you. We'll be looking at this branch of medicine in relation to the average runner, from the level of rank beginner to aggressive competitor. Believe it or not, sports medicine has proven every bit as valuable to the weekend athlete as to the paid professional. If an athlete is injured, precious time is lost, conditioning time, time during which the body loses tone, form, and flexibility. So when a sports accident occurs, you're probably better off placing your injured limbs in the hands of a physician who knows something about sports medicine and sports surgery. But what can you do to prevent sports injury? And how can you speed recovery should one occur despite all your precautions?
The first and the most common causes is poor training techniques. The person who is 35 years of age, who sees a program on running, buys a set of running shoes which he knows nothing about, then tries to run 2 or 3 miles as a prime candidate. You've got to know to stretch out first, to build up your stamina, to build up your cardiovascular stamina, and then finally, and most importantly, to get the correct running gear for you.
Dr. Sloan is a leading orthopedic surgeon at the UMDNJ New Jersey Medical School and the team doctor for the New Jersey Nets and the New York Giants.
Before running, you've got to spend a minimum of about 15 minutes stretching out all of the muscle groups, not just the legs and the feet, but also the arms, the shoulders, and the torso itself, including the back.
Okay.
More importantly than that, though, you've got to build up your cardiovascular fitness before you attempt to run. And that cannot be done just by stretching.
How can that be done?
Basically by number one, if you're over about 35 years of age, going for stress tests, making sure that you are medically healthy enough to start exercising.
Precaution is the key word in beginning a fitness program. In fact, thousands of sports injuries each year could be avoided by using the correct approach. In order to find out just what this entails, we brought our cameras to the Cardio Aerobics Center in Springfield, New Jersey, run by Dr. Elliot Stein. With the help of exercise physiologist Carrie Gillespie, programs developed here can be geared toward either developing and maintaining fitness or healing injury. But before someone even considers taking up a fitness program, he should have some criteria for determining just what type of program is best for him. Charles Waskovich is undergoing a stress test.
The test itself I'll give you instructions for now. It's a progressive, what we call a multi-stage progressive exercise test on a treadmill, which means we'll start you at a low work level. Every 3 minutes it'll get a little more strenuous. The end point is when you feel you cannot go any further. Now that means it could come because you have a symptom like chest pain, or it could come because your legs just can't go any further. It varies from subject to subject. But if you have any symptoms during the test, you'll let me know, because that may be an important clue. We may want to stop the test early. We'll be watching you. We'll be monitoring your heart rate, your blood pressure, your electrocardiogram. If we see something that looks wrong, of course, we'll stop you before we get you to a maximal endpoint. Yes, this particular type of machine is displaying the electrocardiogram in 3 different views. We can change the views if we want to see something a little different. Each view provides electrical information about the heart's activity, but from a different vantage point. These other numbers indicate, as you see here, this is the heart rate. This is the elapsed time into the test, so he's going almost a minute now. The speed of the treadmill and the elevation. We vary the workload based on 2 parameters. One, how fast it's going, and how much of a hill the patient has to climb. You got about 10 more seconds, Charles. You got it for us? Yep. Okay, good. And we'll stop in 15 minutes. Charles, after this is over, we ask you to come and lie down. Okay? Good. Okay, come over here and lie down again. Just sit right over here. You don't want to let it fall off. Lie back, straight back, and relax. Good. Straight back, and just take it easy now. Good. Okay, now just hands at your side and just cool off. Good. What would you say gave out on you? Was it the legs, the breathing? Legs more than anything. Okay.
We've just seen a stress test administered by Dr. Elliot Stein, and now we're sitting with Dr. Stein and Carrie Gillespie, who is the exercise physiologist here at the Cardio Aerobics Center, and we're going to be discussing with them what we've seen. Dr. Stein, did you get pretty much the results you expected to get from Charles's stress test?
Yes, I think overall that's exactly what I expected. He's in very good shape. He performed about to the level where I thought he should. His blood pressure was slightly higher, the systolic was slightly higher than we sometimes see, but someone built like Charles, that's not unusual, and it's certainly not indication of any disease state. His electrocardiogram showed no signs of any problem with his heart circulation. He had no significant rhythm problem. He had no unusual symptoms. He
Overall
was,
good health,
yes,
basically.
fine, in good shape.
Who would you recommend to take a stress test like this? What sort of person?
Well, it's a question that's been asked many times, and the answer will depend on who you're talking to. There have been criteria set up by the American Heart Association, and we pretty much go by them. If you're a male over 35 who have no risk factors, by risk factors we mean high blood pressure, high cholesterol, family history, smoking, and other such problems. If you have none of those and you're over 35 and you're intending to start some kind of exercise program, it's worthwhile to have a stress test. If you have one of the above mentioned risk factors, then probably age 30. For females, it's 5 years older. So if you're a female and 35 and you have risk factors, you probably should have a stress test. If you're 40 and have no risk factors, then you should have a stress test.
I see. Well, how much does a stress test cost?
Well, at our center, it's $175. Now, this includes a complete cardiovascular history and physical. It includes a resting 12-lead electrocardiogram, the stress test itself, and also an exercise prescription, which is unusual.
I see, but basically that's quite a lot of money for somebody who wants to start, the average person who wants to start, say, a running program. And suppose this person just can't afford the $175. Is there an alternative?
Well, if the information you get from a stress test is rather unique. You can't get it from going to your doctor and having a resting electrocardiogram taken and have him listen to your heart and lungs. Questions have been raised as to the accuracy of a stress test in patients who are not having symptoms. And I think these are valid questions. In other words, what's the yield? Is it worth that amount of money? Very often people come for stress testing who are experiencing symptoms and they feel that something has changed, and very often the desire to start some kind of program because they think now they're afflicted by some type of severe problem and maybe it's not too late, they're going to go out and do it. In this type of individual, a stress test can save their lives.
I'm trying to find out if there is a valid alternative for somebody who has no symptoms and just wants to
you can start a program, but do it very gradually, perhaps starting with walking and gradually building it up to a higher level of activity. And certainly it's better to start that way into exercise than to not exercise at all. If there's any question about your health, I think you should certainly check with your doctor first, and depending on his philosophy, he may or may not recommend a stress test.
Let's talk a little bit about the preventive program. Is there a basic program that you prescribe for, say, this typical 35-year-old man who comes in and wants to get into shape? Is there a general way you start him out exercising?
Right. Normally we do take the results of the stress test, which is a prerequisite to the program, and we're able to determine at what level we can train them at so that they will develop the proper way that I think is necessary as far as their cardiovascular conditioning. We would use different types of apparatus for the training, not just running, but we may use bicycle ergometers or rowing machines, sundry types of equipment that would be training the person aerobically, as we mentioned before, which basically consists of three main elements. The frequency at which they would train, which would be about 4 to 5 times per week. The intensity at which they would train, which would be approximately 70 to 85% of their maximal ability according to their stress test. And the duration, they would work out approximately 20 to 30 minutes with a 5-minute warm-up and a 5-minute cool-down.
So, in other words, does that vary at all in terms of sport they wanted? If somebody just wanted to golf and another person wanted to play tennis, would the training program vary?
The training program wouldn't really vary because those three elements have to be present for aerobic conditioning to take place. When a person is in better aerobic condition, he's going to be able to perform better at any type of activity that he does. Now, obviously, being in cardiovascular shape is not going to increase someone's skill level at golf, but it will give them the ability to perform physically better, which may in turn give them the ability to improve their skill level. But the aerobic training, the conditioning of the heart is really the first priority of someone who is over 30.
I think, just to interrupt here for a second, tennis players, I think, are a prime example of this.
where they come in and thinking they're in good health because they play tennis 2 or 3 times a week and take a stress test, do not perform particularly well. We put them in an aerobic training program, and they come back invariably saying their tennis is much improved because their stamina is much better. Tennis is a game of stopping and starting, so they'll wait a little while before they serve the ball, they get their breath back. But after they have gone through the aerobic training program, they're better able to handle that aspect of the sport. They can't hit the ball any more accurately, but they can stay on the court longer.
As far as a specific training for different aspects, obviously someone who's younger who is going into, say, sprinting or tennis or type of activities that require short bursts of energy, obviously the person would have to train at doing that kind of activity, more of an anaerobic type of activity, which would develop the body so that it would be able to do short bursts of activity with more strength. Unfortunately, as you get older, the necessity to do short-term type of activities is not as important as it was when you were younger, such as playing football, playing basketball. If a person is in better aerobic health, then it will help their overall fitness level.
Okay. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Charles, we've just seen you take the stress test, and you did seem to do very, very well on it. Can you tell me, how old are you?
I'm going to be 34 next week.
And so you're not really in the risk category?
Not according to the doctor, no.
Do you feel that there's some risk that, have you had a medical history that makes you feel that you would be at risk?
No, I think I have good health, yes.
I see. You've been running for how long?
This is about my 5th year.
And without supervision?
No, I just go out on my own or sometimes run with friends, but not under medical supervision.
I see. Well, why did you start to run?
Originally, I started to run to lose weight. I weighed about 60 pounds more than I weigh right now, and I lost the weight running.
You lost the weight just through running with no change in diet?
I tried to restrict my calorie intake a little, but it was mostly through the running.
I see.
I noticed as I started to run, it started to melt off almost, and then I just kept up the regimen, increasing my distance, and I found as I increased the distance, it proportionally took it off. I reached a point then where the weight change was not significant no matter what I ran. It's about where I am now.
Well, is the weight change obviously then has not remained your sole motivating force? Why do you continue to run? You put yourself through this agony. What, you told me about 6, 7 days a week?
Yeah, 5, 6, 7 days a week.
And
I try to run every day.
How many miles do you run each day?
I average between 5 and 6 during the week, and on weekends about 7, up to 10 sometimes.
Well, why would you choose to do that to yourself?
I like to run.
For what reason, basically? I mean,
well,
obviously there's a lot of pain involved.
Sometimes there's pain, but generally I run to break up my day. I like to get out at noontime. I run instead of eat.
But you could go out and go window shopping.
That's not quite as enjoyable to me. It's a nice break in the day, and I find that you just get away from everything else.
I see.
There are a lot of nice park-like settings around here, and you can get out into those areas and get some sun.
So
and you can do that year-round.
It's a psychological kind of release, is I think what I hear you saying.
Yes. My occupation, I'm an attorney, is I think quite stressful, and I find this also to be a complement to that lifestyle. I found that I've probably become a little more easygoing since I've run, and it's again a complement to the contrary stress that's involved in practicing law.
I see. Are you basically, would you say, a very high-powered, very stressed person?
I think I was a little more high-strung prior to running, but I think I've mellowed out a little, as they say out in California.
You've mellowed out?
Yes.
Well, what would happen if you stopped running? Do you think you'd be able to maintain this mellowness?
I've taken breaks of up to 4 or 5 days because of a bad cold, and I find that I get out of sorts. It's almost as if you miss something that you have to do. I won't say it's habit forming because that's thrown around so much, but
well, it sounds like it's in fact addictive. I mean, if your whole personality, not your personality, but if your emotional kind of way of feeling about yourself changes when you stop running.
Would
Possibly.
you say it's kind of an addictive force?
It could be, but I don't really look at it that way. I just enjoy getting out in the middle of the day or on the weekend. It's a different time during the weekends. I like to run in the afternoon on a weekend, and if I don't do it, I miss it.
How has this affected relationships at all? Personal relationships, work? Do you find that you now see more people or less people?
Well, I have about an hour and a half to 2 hours every day that I see only myself as I run, so it does take up some of your time, and you have to plan your life's regimen, your daily work or whatever you do, so that you can do that and not interfere with what else you're going to do.
Do you find that it interferes with getting together with people that you'd like to see? I mean, suppose you have a business luncheon, or you just want to get together with friends. If you choose to run at night, suppose that must cut into your social life.
Sometimes, but generally I have friends who will run with me. We sometimes make it the thing that we'll do together. Generally, business comes before running, so if I have a business engagement that I have to take care of, I will try to place running some other time during the day. And that often is the reason why I won't run, because business interferes with it. The weather never does. If it rains or it snows or the temperature is very hot, I will still run.
You'll run no matter what, even in this very hot, humid, 100-degree temperature that we've been having.
Right.
Do you find that your intake of fluids and all that has to be different?
Yes, I take into account the weather. If it's very hot as it is right now, I will try to drink a lot of fluids in the evening and in the morning. I try not to drink within 2 or 3 hours before running, and I will increase my salt intake just a little, because it's my understanding that salt retains fluids, and that way they'll be there when I run.
I see. What about runner's high? I've heard a lot about that experience that runners have. Have you ever experienced that?
Yes, I've experienced it when I've run distances in excess of 7 or 8 miles, and I've been able to settle into a constant pace, and that pace is probably a little greater than I'm used to running on a daily basis. You tax yourself a little, and you feel a bit of stress or pain, I suppose. And then all of a sudden you're aware of the pain at a point, and then you're not aware of it anymore. You kind of shift into a sort of a numbness.
So in a sense, it's kind of an escape.
It is. It's a physical escape and a psychological escape, because your mind kind of goes into a neutral as well. And you're really not thinking of anything, but at the same time you're thinking of everything. Thoughts just pass through your mind.
Well, is there anything specific that you learned from the stress test that you will now use in your training?
I think that I found that after talking with Carrie, that you have a maximum heart rate which you can reach, and you really aren't going to train to make it any higher.
Can you use this, though, on your own? Can you actually run and go like this?
Yeah, I think I can do that, and I understand there's also electronic devices that you can use to monitor yourself, and so there are often times when I run and I'm out just to enjoy myself, and I can run 7 or 8 miles at a very comfortable pace, and there are other times which I'll tell myself that I'm going to go out and run hard that day, and perhaps I'm not really running as hard as I could. I don't look at running as something that's stressful. To me, it's very enjoyable, and perhaps I don't train really hard, but I think I achieve the results that I want. I keep myself in what I consider to be good physical condition.
Well, that's obvious. That's been proved by the stress test. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nutrition plays a key part in determining athletic performance. So we went to the UMDNJ New Jersey Medical School to discover how nutrition relates to the beginning runner and to find out how you can achieve your desired physical goals through diet. We spoke with Dr. Elizabeth Munvies, a nutritional expert at the university.
What we should be sure is that the diet is what we call well balanced, that there's a certain amount, there's 2 or 3 servings of vegetables, 1 or 2, at least 3 fruits, 4, maybe 4 to 5 of grains and cereal groups, breads, you might say, pastas, and then some meats, milk, perhaps 2 servings equivalent of milk per day.
Milk is necessary.
I find that if you don't have some food from the milk category, such as yogurt, doesn't have to be milk itself, yogurt, cheese, but we don't get an adequate intake of calcium.
I see, because I know it's often thought that, particularly in the case of runners, that milk creates certain condition which causes cramps.
Some people are lactose intolerant, and lactose is the sugar, the natural sugar in milk, and that will cause cramps if that's so. But maybe they've been taking milk just before they ran, something of that sort, and that might cause cramps, not so much from milk itself, but from fluid, too much fluid at that particular time. So they should have then cheese, some other form of milk.
If I could do that. And, is it possible to lose weight without changing your diet just from running a couple of miles a day?
Well, you can run, you use extra calories by running. And depends on the number of miles that you run. And it takes 3,500 calories to lose a pound extra, so that it just depends on how many calories you use and how long it would take. So you can reduce weight by running, by using exercise, any exercise.
What sort of exercise would you say would be best for general population?
Well,
average
again,
person?
we've been talking repeatedly about the fitness routine. Stretching first, just getting the joints as loose as that individual is capable of doing. And then going into a fitness routine whereby the general fitness of the entire body is stressed.
But isn't it true, though, that a lot of physicians feel that people should just stay away from running? They feel it's not a safe activity at all?
Well, if you do it scientifically or safely, that is, build into it, get the correct equipment, shoes, get the correct surface to run in, you're at least minimizing the risk. Remember, we take risks every time we cross the street. And again, you try and minimize them. You don't go across Fifth Avenue against the light without looking at the taxi cabs coming barreling down on you. And you don't run 5 miles a day in tennis sneakers.
Well, is it true that you can bring about more injuries, more leg injuries as well as foot injuries by the wrong running shoe?
Well, one of the common complaints of a runner is something called chondromalacia, or pain in the front of the knee underneath the kneecap. And in a runner, that's most commonly caused by either poor shoes or poor running surface. If your feet are turned in, you're putting abnormal stresses on your knee. If your feet are turned out, you're putting abnormal stresses. So that you can get into problems all the way up to the hip, where you get into what's called trochanteric pain, or outside of the hip type pain, all the way up to backaches. And finally, you're finished. You're not running till we get it corrected again. I don't think you need the best shoe of any one line. They now have shoes for $75, $85, $95. I'm not convinced at all that the recreational runner needs that immediately. You look for a good heel cushion. Is there spring to the shoe, or do you feel like you're running on your bare feet? You look, does the shoe hold you correctly, or does it make you walk in what's called the pigeon-toed stance, toes in, or running like a duck, toes out? Do you feel like the heel is level when you're running, or do you feel like your heel is turning in the shoe?
It seems like there's so many things to be aware of. I suppose you just have to find somebody who's really knowledgeable about fitting.
There are stores now that specialize in running shoes, and usually they have people in these stores with some knowledge.
Another question very practical question I wanted to ask you in terms of the average athlete running. Many people feel that if they take up a sport like running, they're going to immediately drop pounds as well as inches.
You are going to slowly drop weight only if you watch your diet. You can run forever, and if you eat more because you're hungry, because you're putting out more calories, you're not going to lose any weight at all. It's a combination of diet and activity, be it running, tennis, football, basketball, and I'm not going to specify the sport. It's watching the calorie intake as you're increasing the calorie output. Weight gain or weight loss, now I'm not talking about the amount of fat loss, I'm just talking about weight. It's strictly calories in versus calories out. It's math.
Have you observed in your practice, working with the Giants and the Nets, that a professional athlete has a more highly developed, maybe more highly evolved musculature or skeletal structure than the average person?
They obviously have to. To do what they do, their muscles have to be in better condition than the average individual. to a certain extent, these people are born that way.
That's what I mean, genetically.
It's an innate ability.
Yeah.
You can, as an average person, increase your level of capability in athletics to become a good athlete. But these great athletes are born that way.
Have you ever found somebody that you think is just kind of goes way beyond what the average person is, just in terms of having evolved to a certain point? Like I know I read a bit about Nijinsky, the great dancer, and they said that about him, that he was just incredibly highly evolved. His legs were.
Well, I'll take the example again of Julius Erving, Dr. J. I happen to have known this man over years. He does what's impossible. It is physically impossible to do what he does on a basketball court. He either gives us the illusion or somehow or other it's true that he can jump, start to come down and go back up again. Now, I have seen him in a private exhibition.
How is that possible?
It isn't.
Yeah.
But I have seen it with my own eyes. Now, either he is a master at the optical illusion or he can do it. But either way, he stays in the air longer than is physically possible. Now, there's going to be the NBA highlight film of the year coming out. And there is a move that he makes on this film in which he goes up, changes the ball from one hand to the other hand, decides that's no good, changes the ball from that hand back to the first one, and then dunks it. You can't do these sort of things, but I see him do it.
Wow. Well, what conclusion would you have to draw in that
There's
case?
something different about that man that I don't understand.
If there's one thing I've learned, it's that precaution is the watchword in starting any athletic program. Do your homework on the sport you choose. Find out what the minimum physical requirements are and how you can achieve a state of preparedness. Remember that both physical and mental preparedness are essential to your athletic performance.